So it's long overdue for me to do a what's in the bag video, and I thought today I'd combine it with some general advice from my perspective about how to build a bag. So right to it, I want to start with the most important club, not just in my bag, but I would argue in any golfer's bag, the putter. Before we do the great reveal of my new putter, I just want to point out a few things about a putter. You're going to take about 40% of your strokes with this club. Like, stop and think about that. This is an important club in the bag. That doesn't mean you need to spend all of your money on this club, but I think it means that you need to think about it more than a lot of us do. I think a lot of us, it's like the last thing we think. We just go to the rack and, some of us who kind of get a little club hoey, and I'm guilty of doing it too, will go to whatever the, shiniest new fancy looking putter is. But I think it's important to actually think about this club and dial it in for yourself. So a few things I always think about with putter. First and foremost is the length on the putter. Standard men's putters are usually 34 or 35 inches. I'm really short. I'm 5'6", and I have really, really long arms. I have about a 5'10" wingspan. So that means for me that a 34 or 35 inch putter, I have to choke way, way down on it to feel comfortable. So I previously gamed a 33 inch putter, but very recently I switched to this guy, and it's at 32 inches. So I guess without further ado, I'll show you what it is. First, it has my favorite head cover in the bag, one from Pebble Beach. And as for the great reveal, this is the 66 AF putter, courtesy of What a Playa Golf, customized in some colors that I quite like. And what is this? It's a mallet with a little bit of toe hang. So what does that mean? Another important thing in our putting stroke, of course, no one can actually take a proper, full pendulum stroke that goes straight back, straight through. It's a matter of how much arc we have. And as a general rule of thumb, if you have a straight back, straight through putting stroke or close to that, you tend to prefer a mallet that is face balanced. If you have more of an arcing stroke, you'll typically want to play with a blade that has more what they call toe hang. So if you balance the putter, the toe hangs down a bit. So blade putters tend to suit golfers with more of an arcing stroke. This putter is a bit in between. It is a mallet putter with a little bit of toe hang that might be hard to see on video here. So those are important things to consider when getting a putter. But I will say, relative to other clubs where some of these things really, really matter, I think the most important thing with a putter is to be able to know that you look down on it and it gives you confidence. Compared to other clubs that you might want to really get in the weeds with a fitter on and maybe try to dissuade yourself of notions of what it needs to look like, the putter should look the way you want it to look. I think it's like the first step to being able to roll good putts is having a putter you like looking down on. The only other technical thing that I think does matter about putters, I should say, is lie angle. So that means the angle at which the shaft hits the head of the club, and that's going to affect for your height and for your stance, whether you're able to place the club on the ground in such a way that it's flat or close to flat. I generally noticed a lot of amateur golfers I play with tend to have the toe way up in the air. And look, if that's working for you, great. But I think as a general rule, you want to be sure that your putter can sit flush on the greens. It gives you the best chance to actually, middle the ball with a decent stroke. So I also learned that because of sort of my height and my arm length that I talked about, it really, really suits me to have a putter that's a bit flat relative to stock. So this is the one I game, the 33-inch 66 AF from What a Playa Golf. I've got a Super Stroke Flatso 2.0 grip on it with a counter core in it, which means there's a bit of weight up in the grip of the putter as well. And that's the putter. Moving on to the second most important club in the bag, probably the club you will take the second most strokes with, is the driver. So after much tinkering around, I'm back to an old faithful for me. This is a Titleist TSR2 that came stock at 10 degrees that I have lofted up to 10.75 degrees. And I've got it in an even flow Riptide CB 50 gram stiff shaft. And finally, what's on it is this really cool grip. I'll talk to you more about these in a minute, but this is called a Best Grip. More on that in a sec. So again, back to the subject of fitting. It's a really fine line. I think fitting is important, but some of us get a little over-involved in it. I think with the driver, it really matters. Having a shaft that matches your swing speed and type can really, really affect how you launch the ball with driver. And obviously, this is the club that we're trying to get it farthest out with. This is a club that is get it far and get it accurate. And I really think if I could recommend getting one club fitted for you, it is driver. And when it comes to shafts, I think a lot of people just focus on, okay, like, do I need stiff or regular? And what's my swing speed? And that'll fit me into the right one. I've learned there's quite a bit more to it than that. It's not just your swing speed, it's your swing tempo. It's not just whether it's regular or stiff, it's what the kick point is, what the weight of the shaft is. All of these things will affect how you launch the ball, the launch conditions, the launch angle and spin. And I guess my personal anecdote is the first driver I ever had when I started playing golf, I bought an M2 driver off the rack. I forget what the shaft was. I remember it was a stiff flex. And when I went into my first fitting, they have a really cool tool that they use to actually measure how your shaft is playing. And the guy said, this is playing as a double X stiff. I bet you have trouble launching the ball with this driver. And sure enough, like that was a club that I could barely launch. And almost immediately upon putting any other more well-suited shaft into a driver head for me, I started hitting it better. So I was fitted for this shaft. I did that when I did a PXG fitting a couple of years ago. And before the PXG driver, I did have a Titleist TS2. And similar to the putter, I think it's important that you feel confident looking down on your driver head. Titleist is known for like a very traditional shape on the driver heads. I really like looking down on it. And I admit, and I'll admit more throughout this session here, that I went a bit club ho in doing my most recent bag. I really prioritized things that I liked looking down on that gave me confidence. Obviously trying to balance in clubs that were well suited to me. But this club head purchase was entirely motivated by missing looking down on my old Titleist driver. So TSR2 with the shaft I mentioned. And in terms of distance, this is another separate conversation. But I think a lot of us are fooled into thinking we hit the ball a certain distance. Getting in front of a TrackMan or an indoor launch monitor can be very humbling. I know that at sea level and neutral conditions, I carry this driver about 230, can roll it out to 250. But just to give a rough idea, I'm currently in beautiful Palm Springs, and I've been hitting drives here 300 yards for 2 weeks now. Conversely, I played at Harding Park in San Francisco a few months ago. It was wet, it was cold, I was carrying drives 200, and that's all they were going. So I think it is important to learn with all clubs in the bag, not how far you hit it in Arizona one time downwind into firm fairways in 100-degree heat at elevation, but rather really get a sense of how far you hit each club. Firstly, like I said, it's humbling, but it'll allow you, I think, to hit a lot more greens when you have a better sense of your game. That's the driver. Switching gears entirely from the driver to a club that I was honestly not fitted for is my 3-wood. So the background for me is that this is historically the worst club in my bag of fairway wood. I've really struggled with them for a long time. My last one was a fitted PXG. It was a 5-wood loft and a 3-wood length shaft. There were days I was hitting it well and days that I wasn't. And to be honest, I was doing, I think, what a lot of us do sometimes, which is just perusing Facebook Marketplace for used golf clubs. And I found this on there, and it's quite interesting. It's a Honma TR21 Big LB, they call it, which means that it has a relatively bigger club head than most 3-woods. And it's lofted at only 14 degrees. But because of how big the head is and where the center of gravity is, they call it a high-launching 14-degree 3-wood, which almost sounds like an oxymoron. The shaft in it is a regular flex 60 gram. I'm actually not sure it was the stock shaft that came with this Honma. I will say that it feels closer to a ladies flex than a regular flex. Pro tip, clubs made in Japan tend to play a little bit less stiff than indicated. So a stiff often plays like a North American regular, and a regular can often play even less than regular. But this club has turned into a real weapon for me. As a T club, I can carry it like 220 to 230. Off the deck, I'm carrying it like 200 to 210. I really like it. And I will admit, as I go through the bag here, that not all of this has been done super expertly. This was an impulse purchase off of Facebook Marketplace, but it's rapidly become one of my better clubs. So before we get into hybrids and irons, I think it's a good idea to just talk generally about set makeup. These things have changed a lot in the last several years. As hybrids have become more popular, and as the golf club manufacturers have strengthened loft on irons, I think my general takeaway is that a lot of us are playing these long irons that frankly we shouldn't be. So, it's now common for a lot of sets to not include a 3-iron, sometimes not even a 4-iron. The reality is that a lot of sets of clubs today, particularly once you get into the game improvement category, will have 5-irons that are lofted like the 3-irons of 10 years ago. So what does that mean? Club doesn't have a lot of loft. It's not going to launch very high. The only way to launch it and keep it in the air is with a lot of speed. So if you aren't hitting the ball with a lot of speed, 3, 4, sometimes even 5, 6-irons are clubs we shouldn't be playing. And I've really tried to take ego out of the equation for myself and really eschew having those irons in the bag unless, I put one in my hands that I am able to hit well. So there have been times that I've played up to 4 hybrids in the bag. I currently have 2, and I'll show them to you. First, another head cover that I'm quite pleased with from Pasatiempo in Santa Cruz, California, which is another all-time course favorite. So this, I should have cleaned this, is a Titleist TS2 19 degree. with a Mitsubishi Tensei Blue 70 gram regular flex shaft. And a brief note on that, as a general rule, as you go through your bag, your shafts are going to get heavier and heavier. So your driver will have the lightest shaft, followed by your wood, followed by your hybrids, and then into your irons. But anyhow, this hybrid's a good club for me. I carry it anywhere between 190 and 200 yards. With my sweeping swing, I'm terrible with a long iron, whereas this club, I don't want to say it's easy for me to hit, but I'm not intimidated by having that 200 number in. Like obviously, that doesn't mean I'm going to hit the green with it every time. But more of my misses with this club are pin high than they would be with a 3-iron. For me, if I'm hitting a 3-iron, I'm probably only going to hit it well 1 in every 4 times. And the other times, it's losing a ton of distance. With the hybrid, for me, the dispersion pattern seems to be more left and right than it is long and short. So very often, I'll hit this club and get it the number I'm intending, 190 to 210. The misses tend to be a bit more left and right. And right into a 4 hybrid, which is the same club. A Titleist TS2, this one with 23 degrees of loft. Ooh, another head cover I like. What a play of golf. This club, I can hit up to 200, and what I really like about it is that I can take enough off of it that depending on the conditions, I'll hit it from as little as 170 yards. But typically I conceptualize it as a smooth 180 to 195 club. Not much more to say about it because it's pretty similar to the 3 hybrid. Now we're gonna go into irons, and this gets fun. So a brief note about irons. I talked about thinking about set makeup. There's a few categories of irons that we can play. At the top end, clubs made for really only the best ball strikers are what we call blades. What are blades? Very small club head, very thin soles, very little offset. And these are clubs that, like I say, only the best of ball strikers tend to play. Then you have a whole spectrum of clubs from what we'll call game improvement, cavity backs, all the way to super game improvement, etc. Now, I'm going to say something controversial here. I've played everything from blades to super game improvement irons. And while I wholly concede that, a super game improvement iron is going to be more forgiving than its blade counterpart, I actually hazard to say that the difference in these is exaggerated. So to me, the biggest difference in how these clubs perform is actually just the lofts on them. So blades tend to have more what we'll call traditionally lofted clubs. So back in the day, a traditionally lofted 7-iron might be 34 degrees of loft. Today, some 7-irons in these game improvement clubs will have as little as 28 degrees of loft, which is similar to, an old school 5-iron. So like I say, to me, the biggest difference, having played virtually every type of iron imaginable, is really more impacted by the lofts on the clubs than it actually is of the forgiveness of the face. Now, I'm not encouraging you to go play blades or go play game improvement irons or what have you, but I will say that some people tend to focus on, if you're a 15 handicap, play game improvement irons. If you're a 3, go and play blades. I think there's a lot of different ways to be a 15 handicap. I play with a lot of guys who are strong, who are fit, who generate a ton of speed, and who are actually pretty consistent ball strikers. They can play blades. They're 15 handicaps because their short game is poor, or they're not making good course management decisions. I'm a 6 handicap. I play with a lot of 15s who are better ball strikers than I am. They could play a bladed 4-iron, whereas I wouldn't get anywhere near one. So I think it's worth putting some time into thinking about what type of irons you should play. So with that said, my last set of irons were PXG. They were Gen 4 XPs, which are basically their most game improvement oriented iron. I liked them. I had no issues with them, save for I got tired of looking at them. They were a little big, a little shovelly, and after a couple of years with them and several hundred rounds on them, I decided I wanted something a little more unique, and this is full-blown confession. I wanted to look in my bag at something that I didn't see a lot of other golfers playing, just because it makes my bag feel a bit more special and unique to me. So I wound up with a pretty interesting set here. These are sub 70 659 CBs. And why do they look old and rusted like your grandfather's clubs? That's because, here, let me give you a bit of a better look here. They look this way because I ordered them in a raw finish, and then I put them in a mix of water and vinegar overnight to accelerate how quickly they rusted. And then I got very lightweight Mitsubishi Chemical. I think they're progressive. They weigh anywhere from 75 to 85 grams throughout the set. Regular flex graphite shafts. I also got some ferrules from BB&F that are kind of cool. And I got them in 6-iron all the way through gap wedge. So compared to my, super game improvement PXG clubs, these are in theory far less forgiving. But if you've been watching my videos lately, I think I am hitting these just fine. I'm hitting lots of greens with these things. Launch characteristics are good because I was fitted for the shaft. I really have no complaints about these at all. Again, another controversial statement is I don't think these perform any better or worse than any of the major brands. Sub 70 is a direct-to-consumer brand like a PXG, so you won't see them, at the PGA Tour Superstore or your local golf shop. But you can order them from their website. This isn't a paid promo. No one's paying me to play anything, much to my chagrin. But yeah, I think this is another one where get fitted for the right shaft and go and hit a few. Most local golf shops will have a launch monitor that you can go and hit some balls in front of. Is this the best decision for me? I don't know. What I know is I'm hitting them well and I like them. So I got those in 6-iron through gap wedge, and then I stuck with sub 70 when it came to my wedges. I also picked up a 54 and 58. They're JB Raw, they're called. I don't know what grinds are on them. I do know they're both mid-bounce clubs. These are interesting ones for me. I don't like taking full swings with either of them, to be honest. I'm much more comfortable backing off. So what is a full 54 for me? I don't know. Because I'm comfortable hitting it up to about 80, 85 yards. I don't like swinging any harder with it. I'd rather back off a gap wedge. And that's because I've played, thousands of rounds of pitch and putt in my life with it was a pitching wedge then, but now lofted like a modern day gap wedge. So I'm comfortable hitting that gap wedge anywhere from 80 to about 110 yards. The 54 I'll hit up to about 85 yards. 58, I'm not really sure. It's really a feel club. It's probably the club I'm least comfortable in the bag manufacturing shots with. I hit it out of bunkers, and I'll hit it if I need to get something elevated around the green. Now, finally, I would usually have a 5 hybrid in there, but I did keep around my old PXG 5-iron from my set with the same shaft that I'm playing in the rest of the irons. This I can hit up to about 185 yards, maybe a bit more off a tee. But I was saying earlier that, a lot of us don't have the skill needed to hit these long irons. I don't think this one's going to stay in the bag forever because I'm comfortable hitting it off a tee, but off the deck, I've been a bit of a nightmare with it. And it wouldn't surprise me to see maybe even a 27-degree hybrid go back in the bag. A brief note about the grips in my bag. I mentioned earlier that I'm using these Best grips. So these are really, really tacky leather grips. They're awesome for me in the Pacific Northwest because as these get wetter, they get even tackier. So I'll often play without even wearing a glove with these. A shout out to Best grips. Like I said, I'm not getting paid to do any of this, but Best grips, I put them on a few months ago when I got these new sub 70 irons. Really, really like them. I recommend checking them out. Let's also go through the rest of the things in my bag. Water bottle, very important. I drink usually like 4 to 5 of these during the round. Rangefinder. Brief note on rangefinders and actually things about budgeting generally with a golf bag. You can get a lot of rangefinders these days for $100 compared to the $300 or $400 Bushnell. If that's what's in your budget, obviously a lot of them perform well. I will say that if you can stretch the budget, I've used a few rangefinders. There's a few things I really like about these Bushnells. Firstly, they're really, really accurate. They lock onto targets quickly. They have good magnification. This one does slope and even adjusts for temperature and elevation. This one is a Pro XE. It's a few years old now. The big reason, though, I would recommend splurging on this item if you can, is that these things have no moving parts in them and they last forever. So compared to a lot of things we buy in the bag that we're swapping in and out, and we might not have the budget for, a few $100s every year for new wedges, if you can splurge for the $300 for a Bushnell, these things will literally last 20 years. I play with lots of friends who are using Bushnells from the early 2000s. I think they perform better than their $100 counterparts. Big fan of this thing. There's a common question of what you have in your pocket on the golf course. I am a little crazy about this, bit of a stickler. I always have exactly this in my pocket. So that's a single prong divot tool, also whataplayagolf.com. And then I always have 2 long tees and 2 short tees in my pocket. As for the ball, this is another topic when it comes to budget and where performance comes. If you're losing a lot of golf balls, don't buy expensive golf balls. I play with a lot of guys who, insist on playing a Pro V or a TP5 and they're dumping 2 sleeves of them around away. Firstly, if you're losing that many, you're probably not, middling the ball all that consistently. Like I would work on good contact before, convincing yourself that the ball you play is going to make that big of a difference. My game, I'm not a scratch golfer, right? But I don't lose a lot of golf balls. So what I prioritized in trying to feel out balls was which balls I liked feeling off the face, chipping and putting. Those really affect my confidence level. And I did find that the Pro V felt best, so I play a Pro V when I can. Certainly in the winter or in really crazy conditions, I'm not as crazy. I'll play whatever I have in the bag. Final few items. Very, very important. Sunscreen always in the bag, always wearing it. And finally, a few bags of goodies here. Well, first I have a scorecard holder. This is a company out of Vancouver. I'm gonna put their name in the description because I forget what they're called, but they make cool leather head covers and scorecard holders. I really like this one. They also made this little shag bag, or what do you call this? Valuables pouch? I don't friggin' know. What do I have in here? Winter gloves, always needed in Vancouver. Back pain medication, always needed. Driver adjustment tool, always needed. More sunscreen, this one in stick form. More Tylenol, rangefinder batteries, and a few pencils. And finally, always reppin' British Columbia, my home province. And all that's in here is markers, teas, and more pencils. Ooh, finally glove, actually. What glove are we playing? This one has been going for almost a year. That's why it's looking a little ratty now. This is a Herzl glove. Herzl, I think it's a German company. They make gloves out of kangaroo leather. They also perform really well in the wet. Like I said, this one, despite looking ratty, it's literally gone more than a year. Finally got its first rip about 2 weeks ago. Really like this guy. Also, of course, towel and brush. And that's what's in the bag.